Hey y'all. All right. Something incredible has happened. The president of Actors Equity just released an article on Deadline in which she is endorsing stage managers and actors to get involved in the support of distributing the vaccine, which I think is awesome. It's a great moment of solidarity. It's putting us and the country and everyone else first. I like to think of it as a form of care, which brings us to this episode, which is all about caregiving and if there's a space for it in Actors Equity Association. I read the article today and I had so many thoughts. One, this is good. This is good. We need to, as a group, get more involved in what's happening. And with so many of us, one, out of work, looking to figure out how we can make a difference, this is one of those clear ways. I was very impressed when IATSE, the president, and their group had put out something similar a little bit earlier. And as soon as that was out, I thought like, wow, I wonder how that would work if we were to bring that into the Actors Equity Association. Because when all of this first started, the big argument coming from stage managers was this is not our job, which makes sense. Because a lot of times when things don't make sense or something isn't clear, it tends to fall on the back of the stage managers. But I wondered, would the stage managers change their mind? When it comes to vaccinations and the greater good of our union, would they change their minds? So then I thought a little bit more about President Schindler's message. And I thought about the last time I actually spoke with President Schindler. Last time I spoke with President Schindler, it was President Schindler, Executive Director Mary McCall, and myself. This is the last time we spoke. Essentially, it was around the time that Kate and Mary had just given this slide presentation, given a timeline of events of what happened between Actors Equity Association and SAG-AFTRA. And what got me about it is some of the things didn't line up. So I was like, hey, I want to support, I want to get involved in the rally, but I want to have a meeting because some things don't feel right. Because again, I care very deeply. I'm a dual member. I did not like the fact that they were fighting, that these unions were fighting. So I wondered well, what's the empathetic thing to do? What's the right thing to do? So when I got into this meeting with Kate and Mary, I straight up just talked to Kate about how I felt. Something that really concerned me and why I had kind of pause in getting involved was the silence. I think about a guy named Galloway Stevens who owns a theater. He's the artistic director of a theater on the West Coast. And he talked about how he had submitted so many proposals and wasn't getting any response. And this was something you would hear from a lot of producers. We want to try and get things back to work. Our numbers are dramatically low in these select areas. And we want to try and get something going. We want to experiment. We want to test our strategies. And there was no real communication. And I went, that's really weird. But I'll submit. I'll see what I can do. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, and we did talk about, was this idea of weaponization. When it came to the battle between Actors Equity Governance and the Equity League trustees due to decisions that were made during COVID, it was weird. And I told Kate that I felt really uncomfortable with the use of BIPOC. Now, I had been saying this in delegate meetings and speaking with counselors, and a lot of them off record or in the Black Theater Caucus for us, by us, with us event would publicly say, yeah, that wasn't probably the best decision, or it seemed kind of odd. And then I saw that happen again with SAG-AFTRA, the weaponizing of BIPOC. And I wondered, and I talked to her about this as well. And I was like, well, only one of the unions has a Black executive director. So what are we saying about David White? And I felt uncomfortable because out of the two unions, SAG-AFTRA, their president and their national executive director were the only ones that made time for this show. So then I brought up the election as well and the weaponizing of BIPOC and how that worked. And something very interesting that she had said was that not until we spoke did she see the argument that I was making, which was great. It was a moment of hope. It was a moment of solidarity. I got really excited. So then she followed back with the question of, well, how do I connect? How do I talk to over 200 delegates? How do I stay involved in the fight? I thought about it. And from that meeting, where again, I told her exactly how I felt. and how unhappy I was about the weaponizing the BIPOC and when we choose to speak and when we don't choose to speak, I thought, oh my God, if President Shindo has asked that question of how she can connect, then this is a moment of care. This is a moment of empathy. So I fired back with an email inviting her to season 2 of The Receipts, and that's me going against my word because I said I wouldn't invite her after her not being available for season 1. But again, you got to sometimes put the bigger picture above yourself sometimes. So like, of course, I sent the invite and I said, before you come on and I think I said we do the interview not on the Receipts platform, but on like the BIPOC Delegates for AEA page. But before that, we could talk to all of these organizations that have really been pushing for more advocacy for BIPOC members and artists. We could have a meeting with them. We could get Actors Equity in on the ground, and we can do it without the barrier, the AEA website wall, as I like to say. I didn't get a response. So I reached out to some mutual friends and they were like, well, what happened? And I said, hey, I told her how I felt about the BIPOC thing. Like, this is essentially how I felt. And like, I thought this was good. And this was a lot of the argument that I was getting when I would speak to like our Black members. So I thought, let's just take it to the top. And they went, no. You don't do that. Sometimes people take things personally. And just because you're ready to have the conversation doesn't mean that everyone's ready to have the conversation. Since then, I've made a game out of it. I'll see Shindo writing a Facebook post. I'll message under it with a truth. I'm not like trolling, but like just a truth, just to see how she doesn't respond and stuff like that. And then I went, whoa, we have a bigger problem. It's empathy. It's care. It's the courage to speak up. As I started pushing around the Black Theater Matters bill, there was a certain section that I would get a lot of pushback on. And I want to share that with you today. Can I get BTM? So in this is a section of the Black Theater Matters bill that deals directly with caregivers. In good faith, I make the motion. I move that in good faith, prioritize ensuring bargaining partners and theaters provide financial reimbursement for caregiver expenses of or secure hours through caregiver services for equity professionals who are obligated to support legal dependents while under contract. The theater or bargaining partner must provide financial reimbursement at a minimum cap of 85% of a single week's contracted pay, or 500, whichever is higher. 400 hours of care from an insured and licensed professional and or dependent supervision through licensed educational programs for a minimum of 75% of the hours needed for dependent supervision. Educational programs, as supervision may only be used as a viable option insofar as the educational programs are appropriate for the age and abilities of legal dependents. Bargaining partners or theaters will be contractually obligated to provide at minimum one method of support listed above for legal dependents or equity professionals while under contract at said theater, or for said bargaining partner within all 50 states, the federal district, and all 5 self-governing territories, and bind them to a specialized working contract crafted only by the Actors Equity Association. Seemed pretty cool. Seemed like a great empathetic thing to do. For myself, I think of my grandparents who spent a good amount of their life raising me. At some point, I would like to be there for them while still balancing a career. In 2 years, I want to be able to present a baby and do all the adorable Instagram stuff that I find irritating sometimes. So thinking down the future, I know this applies and I know it's important. As I went to counselors to talk about this, or delegates, or just people adjacent, a lot of people were for it and some people said this makes no sense. This is not what the union should be thinking about. This is not in our purview. I don't understand. So that made it even clearer. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about care. We need to talk about empathy, and we need to talk about the roles they play in a trade union. Originally, when I wrote that section, I was trying to create this pipeline where actors would come in and we'd use open market systems and we'd find a way to get actors to do the caregiving while the show was going. It was something so convoluted. And I had the chance to meet Rachel of PAL, who I was connected to through Jen and Leanne. I actually ended up going through. It's really interesting. There were like 2 roads that led me to Rachel. But as I got to know Rachel and research Rachel for the show, what I learned was the meeting was probably going to be inevitable. But thankfully, we met earlier than I expected. And Rachel came back in response to what I had originally written with what I had just read to you a little bit earlier. I looked at it and I went, oh, subsidies. Like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's so brilliant. It's so simple. It's so clean. It almost made me wonder, what's the problem? Here we are, season 2, episode 3 of The Receipts. Maybe 80 hours of research on caregiving. And I think I know what the problem is. So today, I have 3 incredible guests who are going to help us navigate this and bring some clarity around these murky waters known as caregiving. Let's play that intro.
This week on The Receipts, the conversation is about caregiving in theater. Where, if anywhere, does parenting and acting intersect? Davon has recruited his own Babysitters Club of theater's leading caregivers to hear what they think about Broadway babies. Introducing Jennifer Malinke, owner of Broadway Babysitters LLC, a company formed from the love of children, love of art, and love for the artistic community. Hiring only CPR certified special needs trained sitters with a clean background, Broadway Babysitters aim to provide families with exceptional, unique, and specialized childcare. Jennifer's acting career has taken her to Broadway in shows such as the revival of Into the Woods, the first national tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, among many other things, including The Power of Music with Josh Groban, a pilot made about her life. Rachel Spencer Hewitt is the founder of Parent Artist Advocacy League for the Performing Arts, or PAL, a national organization that serves as a resource hub, community, and solutions generator for parents in the arts and the institutions that support them. Focused on elevating the national standard of care for caregivers in the performing arts and media, PAL's work has been featured in numerous publications, including the New York Times and American Theater Magazine. With an MFA in acting from Yale School of Drama, Rachel has been seen on Broadway in King Charles III, off-Broadway in The Seagull, the New York premiere of Civil War, and Peter and the Starcatcher, amongst other credits. Leanne Godot has been the Director of Operations of Broadway Babysitters since May 2018. In her time there, she has worked with families to match them with artistic sitters, meet their childcare needs, and assisted with streamlining infrastructure for smooth, stress-free, online and in-person operations. She is an NYC-based actor, singer, producer, and a voiceover artist that graduated from NYU Tisch with a Bachelor in Fine Arts, minoring in Business of Entertainment, Media, and Technology. The caregivers are assembled. Let's join Davon as he helps navigate where caregiving lives in the world of theater.
Surprise! Here is the Babysitters Club. Now, mind you, it is caregiving. So I have called my Babysitters Club. So for past shows, we have like the Council of Black Excellence. We have this. And today we have the Babysitters Club. And I'm so excited.
I love it. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
All right. So props to Napoleon. Thank you for that video. And let's start with, I'm going to start in the order in which I met everyone. So Leanne, one, how is navigating a career been for you? Because I got to see one of your videos, which I think we played in that intro, which is, I had no idea you were that funny. And two, how did you get involved with Broadway Babysitters?
Well, I mean, I like the video said, I went to NYU. I was already in New York. So by the time I was here, I started in a place where I was already ready for like the next thing, even when I was still navigating doing acting. So, I do small films. I work with new up and coming artists all over. And that's my favorite part about anything that we do is seeing things grow from the beginning to the end. And that's why I'm also, a producer and all of that good stuff. But when I started with Broadway Babysitters, it started out as like a survival job. Honestly, I was like, I love doing administrative stuff. I have this not weird. I mean, I have a double brain. I love the type A stuff, as they say, type A, but I also love the creative stuff. So being in Broadway Babysitters allowed me to, scratch that itch of the administrative side. So it started out just to pay the bills. And then as I started working with Jen and the rest of the team, I couldn't help myself. I was like, what can we do? How can we make this the best thing it can possibly be and help the most people? And it's just grown to be this amazing thing ever since.
So speaking of how you got involved, Jen Malenke, talk to us about the inspiration for Broadway Babysitters and where it is going.
Great. Yeah. So I lived in LA for about 8 years. And then when I moved back to New York, I needed a job. So a friend of mine put me on a text chat with everybody. And it was a lot of parents and a lot of artists, actors who, everyone would be on the same page. And someone was like, hey, I need a sitter for Julian tonight. Oh, I can't do it. Can you do it? So-and-so, blah, 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 blah. And I was on this text chain and I told her, I was like, you know what? You should organize this. And she goes, oh, I don't want to. I was like, can I do it? And she goes, go for it. So I wanted to create something where first of all, actors could have jobs without having to work in restaurants, and jobs that were flexible so they could leave to do shows and come back and they could set their own schedule. Second of all, I wanted to give discounted childcare to actors because I have so many friends who have kids and they all have to choose between being a mom and being an actor. And I don't think that is fair. That is not, in this day and age and in the change that is coming and the change that has already happened, that is something that's got to change because you don't become a different person when you have kids. Mm-hmm. You just have kids. And we're like the only profession that doesn't give maternity leave, that doesn't have, there are countries that provide, paid maternity leave, paid childcare, centers, and they have centers in their buildings, So we're one of the only that doesn't give maternity leave, that doesn't have. Echoing.
We got a feedback.
What was that? That was me again. So then also, it was all based on trust as well, because these sitters all knew these parents. So everybody was already trustworthy. So I made our business referral based. So only people that we know or people that are referred to us by people that we know are hired by us, and we train them. We also have them work with special needs children because artists are wonderful at figuring out how to speak to them and how to understand them and how to, get into their kind of frame of mind. And also we can give a lesson on the side. So one of the biggest things is I wanted to make a community. I wanted to make a huge artist and maybe a supportive non-artist community, people who could support the arts later. Do you know what I mean? So we wanted to bring artists into people's homes, because we're kids at heart. We play, we make some of the best caregivers, and it just is a win-win all around, and I wanted to bring, since a lot of arts programs are cut from schools, especially nowadays, I wanted to have something where we could come in and give them a lesson on the side for a little bit extra money. So you can get a dance lesson, you could get a violin lesson, you could get a voice lesson, and it's just been an incredible journey so far. We've Leanne is gold. I don't know what I'd do without her. Seriously, she like is so creative and comes up with so many. She's just amazing. And another thing is we want. It's true. It's not just because you're here. I say that without being on camera too. No, but we are actually set up to. Well, we're getting set up to launch in other cities now. So we have a brand new website. We are onboarding as we speak. We're onboarding a lot of sitters, and yeah, that's where this came from. And also we do things where we have worked with PAL, and we have babysat for people on set. We have babysat for shows in rehearsal. Because our people know this area. They know this. They know the stage. They know movie sets. They know how to act. They know how to be. And it is just kind of a win-win all the way around. It's maybe somebody who might not meet, a Broadway star might be able to sit for them. And then maybe the Broadway star goes, hey, you know what? That girl was really good at this, blah, blah, blah. Bring her in for this. Who knows? You just never know. Or guy, not just girls, guys, anybody.
All people.
All people, all humans.
Which brings us to Rachel Spencer Hewitt,
Yes.
who just came off of an epic 10 out of 12 conversation, which for me, it's so like 10 out of 12s are so commonplace. Like, again, they were before me, before I even got in. Then I'm like, this is just what it is. And after that talk, I was like, shut it down. Damn it. And also, you're the owner of the Parent Artist Advocacy League.
Yes.
Talk to me about the inspiration for it and where you see this going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a mom of two, ages 6 and 4. And when I first became pregnant, it was a very intimate experience. I had nothing but, very brief anecdotes to go off of, but no one really in my sphere who could talk to me about it. I had babysat for some moms in my experience, which was actually the most that I could take with me in terms of motherhood. But my pregnancy, while it was like lovely to keep it private and intimate, I also did not trust our industry to know what to do with my changing body, just to put it flatly out there. With all the sexual harassment and like lack of boundaries in my 20s, I turned 30, became pregnant, and I was like, they're going to have no idea what to do with this. I just knew. And so I kept it a secret for 5 months, didn't tell anyone. And then I decided to tell my agent, and I entered the space with such fear and trepidation. And it turns out he's an incredible human being and jumped out of his chair, celebrated me, threw the door open, announced it to the office. I was just ecstatic. And he set the bar. In that moment, I remember having the thought, this is the way it should always be. And I had carried that with me through journaling about my experiences when I was pregnant, but I still wasn't talking about it publicly. I had just developed my own internal standard. And then when, I actually booked a job on Broadway, and my little girl was over a year of, lugging her up and down the stairs with the stroller and breastfeeding right before my auditions at a Starbucks, to leave her with the babysitter there, to change my top, to run over there for like 90 seconds of na 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 na, and then come back, pay the babysitter way more money than I could afford because I was working multiple jobs at the time. I didn't have Broadway babysitters yet. And then take my child back, load her up again, go back down the subway, over and over again, turning down 95% of auditions because I couldn't afford off Broadway, because I would be paying my sitter more than I would be making per week. And that's just not sustainable. And I was going through this, and I was journaling because there are also really funny stories that were happening. And I ended up at a Christmas party a year and some into doing this and thinking that like I was really killing it. And for all intents and purposes, fine, I was in like the whole uphold the systemic structure sort of way. But I was at a Christmas party, and, I was chatting with friends, and a colleague of mine was like, oh, how are you? And had this like very like sad tone to his voice because he knew that I had become a mother. And I was like, oh, I was gonna shift the space, and I was like, it's going great. And I was talking about how I was making it work with auditions and pulling myself up by my bootstraps and like just really buying into the whole belief. And he stopped me and he said, oh, well, that's not everyone else's experience, so I wouldn't talk about that. And I was so stunned that I was being shut up even about my successes, that my brain started to race. I mean, alarm bells were going off, and all I could think about was, well, if I can't talk about my successes, where's the space where people can talk about when this is hard? And if that's not everyone's experiences, who are the people that he's talking about, and how can I find them? And I was instantly painfully aware that I was dressed to the nines and pretending like I was carefree while my child was blocks away with a babysitter late at night in her stroller at a Starbucks and like nowhere to go. And I was like, that's it. And so I picked her up from the Starbucks. I went to the bar where everyone was meeting. I like paraded her around in front of everybody. And on the whole way home, I was like, I'm going to do the opposite. Instead of shutting up about it, I started posting a blog about it. And I expected to be alone, but actually messages started pouring in. And I started to research different organizations around the world, like MAM Ireland and PIPA UK. And I wrote for Hal Round about it. And eventually a friend of mine was like, we need something here in the US. And within 4 months, PAL had started and launched in New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. And it's been growing tremendously ever since. And I've met some of the most incredible people who've taught me a lot about support and self-care. But yeah, that was the journey here.
Awesome. That's great. You already beat me to the blog. I was like, oh, she answered that.
Oh
that.
no. Sorry.
And scene.
It's been a long path. And I'm stopped, so I didn't stop. And I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. So this is the thing, like, what is it? I got injured this past weekend. So that's why everything looks a little different, because I don't really have the like use of my hands. They're a little sore. And it's just like, oh, great. I don't have to look down. I don't have to switch. Oh, relief. So I celebrate you for that. Let's start with the 3 big questions, and then we're going to get into the receipts.
Cool.
The first one, how do you define caregiving? And what exactly is a caregiver?
I think that's a Rachel question.
Sure. Legally, I would define it as someone who is tasked with caring for a legal dependent. And that care can include financial, domestic duties, even emotional labor, like organizing pharmacy appointments, to refill medications, to changing a diaper, to doing groceries. A caregiver is anyone who is responsible for the survival and the life quality of another individual.
All right. Now here's the follow-up. You've described, I think it's the invisible caregiver problem. What is that?
The invisible caregiver problem is kind of what I experienced that first year of being a mother, which is that our industry has not taken into consideration the fact that caregivers leave when it becomes too much. And so there is very little representation in the room. And the representation that is in the room, when they try to talk about their struggles, they're told to either make do or that it's possible. So because caregiving doesn't happen in the theatrical space, because it's not a responsibility that really enters the dressing room unless it's forced, people feel distant from it and they don't feel responsible for it. There's no social equity. There's no social responsibility that they feel they need to engage with. And that also intersects, let's be also very intentional saying this, that intersects and compounds all the other invisible or marginalized obstacles and impediments. So that's just general caregivers. What about the BIPOC caregivers? What about Black mothers? They already experience mistreatment in the hospital, or they have a high rate too, and then they enter the workplace and there's no support for them. The workplace takes no care. And so it's really about lack of representation in the room and then being silenced once they enter. Or the fear of being fired, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It's real. To piggyback on the idea, on the plight of marginalized groups, specifically BIPOC groups, I think about the diversity report that came out. We all know it's abysmal. It's awful. Majority people getting cast, majority of shows are aimed to satisfy and satiate white artists. So with that being said, and understanding these additional issues that all of us at some point will have to go through, how exactly do we make this more equitable? And how do we make sure that these marginalized voices get a fair shot through caregiving?
Yeah, I think that what we do is first acknowledge the problem, that it depends on our efforts for EDI and increasing representation intersect with things like the disability community, the caregiving community. And then the second thing is to make sure that there is financial and institutional policy that holds everyone accountable, so that this whole idea of like, oh, it's flexible, bring them into the room, etc., is all dependent on the biases of the people in charge. And we all know that that's going to default into prejudice. So we put it into policy. Then what we do is we have a public standard that people can claim as their right. And when they claim as their right, they're less likely to self-censor or self-edit or exit the industry. And that's a good place to start. It's just the beginning there.
Leanne, when it comes to your job as director of operations, what are some of the programming options that you found to be most successful when bridging, the Broadway world with caregiving?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen it so much with so many of our members. We cater to both families that are what we say mug, which are the non-artists, and also the artist families. And with our artist families, even more so now than when I first joined the company 2.5 years ago, we see them saying, you know what, I need I need someone exactly what Rachel was talking about, just for this audition and just for, backstage while I'm in this rehearsal. And parents are becoming more comfortable slightly because they are in a place of power saying, I need to have it backstage, but we're seeing it from people who are like I said, that place of being able to ask for it. We haven't had as many of the ensemble members, the actors who are not in the decision-making role, be able to ask for that. We've been able to do things like we have had a family have a specific room designated to them for their having childcare backstage. And it's wonderful to have, our actors who, as Jen mentioned earlier, do know what it's like to be an actor backstage. They know when you're supposed to be maybe a little quieter, and they know when you're supposed to, what it means to be called to set or to be on stage. So our actors get to be there just from a perspective of learning from the industry, period. They're learning even when they're on set or backstage, but they're also getting to focus when put in the specific situation that they should be given, the resources that they should be given. They're also able to give the proper childcare that fits the needs of the family, the theater, the kid, and also the sitter themselves. Because if the sitter doesn't feel comfortable, then the family doesn't feel comfortable, and the theater doesn't feel comfortable, and no one's happy. So it's important for everyone.
Jen, what was the exact year you started Broadway Babysitters?
I had the idea in June of 2015.
Oh, you gave the month. I know that's right. So 2015, it is now 2021. And I want to ask a question that's been thrown out there before. Do you believe that America is incredibly behind when it comes to caregiving?
Oh, 100%. We're 150%. We're way behind. Like, I was even just watching The View the other day, and one of the women were talking about just the unfair advantage that they had because they were stars, that they could have this childcare and they could afford this childcare that other working people, mothers, do not have, or parents in general do not have. We are so far behind. It's almost like it's pushed under the rug. It's like, well, this happens all the time and they just have to deal with it, and they have to make a choice whether to take a career or not to raise their children. And that is not where we are as a culture, as a community, as a world now. That's just not where we are. We should be so far. It makes me sick sometimes, and I was listening to Rachel, even just with our industry, talk about, that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this about, because we're one of the only industries that we have to keep auditioning for new jobs. We start over every single time. Yes, we have our reputation, we have the people that we know, but we still have to start over. And to pay your sitter $80 for you to go somewhere and not even know if you're even going to get a call back, that's just out the window. That's gone. And how can you support your children and your family when you're just throwing money away to go audition for things that you have no idea if you're even going to be looked at seriously for? So I think that we are so far behind, definitely in America and definitely in this industry.
Yeah, and I also just want to jump in too really quickly that it's not just actors. We also have designers who are parents and do elder care, who go from tech week to tech week to tech week to tech week, which is part of what we talked about at the 10 out of 12 conversation. We have backstage crew. We have who depend on overtime hours just to make a decent, hardly decent pay scale. So what we're looking at here is really that invisible caregiving is also put on top of lack of pay equity, put on top of extensive hours. And that's why it compounds the dilemma.
Let me be clear really quick that we include everybody in artists. So when we give discounts to artists, we include everybody, anybody who is in the business.
Even stage managers?
Oh, yes. And we hire anybody in the business too. We have lots. Actually, our stage managers are like our best babysitters because they are so on it and on top of it and organized and fun, but they like know what they're doing and they're like, yep, got it. Yep. It's fantastic. We love our stage managers. But
even craft services?
You know what? We haven't had that come up, but hey, if they need a sitter, we are here for you.
Okay.
You know? Yeah. If they give me some craft services in my house, sure. Come on in.
That's the discount. Okay. So as a member of the Babysitters Club, I called you all here today because I think I've been on the offense when I've been doing like the diplomacy of talking about caregiving. And for now, I think I'm going to switch roles and I'm going to throw the questions. And these are, my God, these are actual questions or actual statements that I've gotten. And I would love to have you respond to it. The first one being, what do you say when someone goes, you chose to have that baby?
Can I go with this one?
Yes, please.
Okay. So when you weaponize the word choice, it's rooted in classism and racism, and it only results in harm. You are not talking about autonomy with that word, and you are using a word that's designed for bodily autonomy to absolve yourself of social responsibility for that individual's need. It's 100%. A garbage response. And the biggest problem is that it is rooted in this idea that everybody made a choice when their parent got sick. Everybody made a choice when they had twins instead of a single child. There is so much about the caregiving lifestyle that is out of an individual's control. You don't know what sort of health issues that person went through to get to that point. And so to make the assumption that you could throw the responsibility of choice on that individual is so audacious that it forgets that we have healthcare only tied to employment in this country, that we have reproductive support that is piss poor for a first world country. And then for you to, on top of that, which a caregiving individual has already endured all of those situations and is now coming to you for help, which probably took a lot of courage. And for you to put the word choice at them as a weapon against giving them what they need and preventing access, that is a huge strike against you. And I would encourage anyone who has ever used that as an excuse, or if that excuse is ever used against you, to remind them there is a social responsibility for you to create access, because we don't create theater in a vacuum. There's a socioeconomic reality outside of this art. And in order for me to participate, you have to contend with it too. That's
all right.
Do they ever ask that question of accountants? Do they say, hey, accountant, it was your choice to have that baby? Do they ask that question? Nobody does. In any other industry, they say, okay, we have to have maternity leave for them. They don't say, well, I guess can't be an accountant anymore, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to follow up with the second one that came. I pay my dues. I pay my dues so that all members can, get the rights and get fair treatment when it comes to their job. Where do children fit in?
I'd love to jump in for a part of this. I've heard enough talks of Rachel. I know she has a response to this too. But
Leanne, you do too.
But my response to that is that, as talked about already, caregiving is not just childcare. It is all walks of life. And we have had so many of our members who are artists, who are people behind the table, in front of the table, behind the scenes, who hire us, hire our sitters, our caregivers for their parent. And everyone has someone in their life that they will need to have to take care of in some point of their life. And if they're lucky and they don't have to, amazing. But it is something that we all will have to do in some capacity, whether it's financial or time spent or otherwise. It's going to affect us all. And so childcare is not the conversation. It is caregiver. It is caregiver.
Absolutely. And I also want to point out that it's the law that we deserve fair treatment. And you cannot purchase that. You pay the dues to create a system that will support it, but we have to be intentional in order to ensure it.
All right. And now the main question. This is the main event. Here we go. Warm up.
Ready. Woo.
Does caregiving, or better yet, is caregiving the responsibility of the Actors Equity Association?
I mean, I have my hands.
Just like,
Okay, well, I'm thinking about that because the word responsibility might not be the correct word. I don't know if it is the responsibility, but it is their responsibility to. Go ahead, Rachel. I have to think about this. Yeah, go ahead.
I would love to jump in, and then Rachel will just clean up the floor. The responsibility of the union is to its members.
Yes.
And taking care of its members should be the priority, period. So if part of taking care of its members is taking care of what they need to take care of, then that should be the most important priority for anybody. And just because, I'll stop there. I will stop there. That's all I have to say for now.
I know what I was going to say, and it also has to do with something Rachel probably is going to say. But when I was at the PAL Summit a couple years ago, when we could go places, oh man, there was a point proven, and I think it was Rachel, that was this makes everything better for everyone. You don't want stressed actors coming to work, worried about their children, where they are, who they're with. You don't want people having to, you want people to be focused in the room when they're in your show, that you want them to be rehearsing in their headspace there. The Actors Equity Association should make that easy for them, right? We get breaks so we can recharge. Why not take care of our children as well? And it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody gets what they need out of this, Go ahead, Rachel.
And sorry.
Yeah, go, Leanne. Go, Leanne.
You also are in providing childcare, in childcare, caregiving, all of the above, for different parts of the process, auditioning, in production, you're getting your members' jobs. Is the other part too. Is so many caregivers have to leave the industry or stop working because they can't provide for their family in doing so. So in providing caregiving options that are something that everyone can reach, and in taking on what is already a responsibility, like I said, to take care of their members, they are getting their members jobs. They are supporting them in their search to make money and support the union and have it be a wonderful circle of joy and daisies.
They are supporting the people who will be parents in the future too, and keeping them in the business as caregivers, and then maybe moving towards, parenthood. Rachel,
like 100% to what both of you have said. I mean, the union's responsibility is to its members. Its members, many of them are or may become caregivers. And what's incredibly important is, and also the point that was Leanne's point, and also the point that Jen made, that it's healthy for everyone. And where it intersects is because the union's goal is to create access to employment and the right to work that is fair and equitable and healthy. And how we treat the caregiver conversation has everything to do with how we see our missional values of care. And that includes self-care as well. When we say everyone will be a caregiver at some point, that doesn't always mean children. That could mean a legal dependent family member. That could mean elder care. But it is so deeply connected to this conversation on how we are allowed to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Conversation of saying, this is an access need. This is a responsibility in my life. I am sick. I had a funeral that I skipped. I had a funeral that I couldn't go to. Those conversations are never going to be allowed in the room unless we unify and we say, if life cannot be acceptable in the workspace and supported, we are never going to have a healthy work environment. I mean, the equity cot, you could say sleep is your responsibility, but they put a cot in there so that I could get it when I need it because they know it makes us healthier actors. They're like, I mean, I could be like, you're wasting my due money because I never take a nap at rehearsal. It's a principle. It'd be like, well, congratulations, we'll make you a badge, but we're not going to use equity money to make the badge. And we're going to ask you to understand that actually this like teeny tiny change, even though it stays folded up next to your mirror, makes a big difference for some people. And those are some people you really want to work with because that's the responsibility of a union. In the word union is the root unity. And when your fellow members come to you and they say, I cannot make this work unless I have access created that is proven by government data is a true hindrance to employment, and you still say no, then pay better attention to why you're contributing your dues, because then you're just giving dues for yourself. And the point of dues is to give them to a union that is unified in creating access for all of its members.
I want to do a big gospel number now after that. I want to be like, hallelujah.
I've been so excited for this episode because I was like, I'm just going to have to sit here and I just get to lob these questions I've been getting.
Thank you for the space. Yeah.
I am the one who uses that equity cot. I use it every single, I don't want to go between and I take naps. I will do it. I will put the equity cot in the bathroom and take a nap in there. Seriously, I do it in between shows or else I can't get through the second show. I just can't. I have to have it. So I'm the one.
Yeah, I'm the one that I'm like, did I take my pillow off the equity cut? Do people think I'm claiming it? Because that's my equity cut.
Yes, I bring my own pillow as well. Yep.
All right. SMs, can I get $500?
Oh,
can I too?
$500.
Is it that easy? What?
So here we go. At the heart of it, we are talking about employment opportunities, Spencer Hewitt said. If you think $500 is too much for your company to set aside, know that it is definitely too much for a parent to set aside in order to come work for you. It is overwhelming for one individual, God help me, but it is doable for your institution. Talk to us about that, Rachel.
I get emotional, actually.
oh.
Yeah, so I'll tell the story after, but just the $500 mark is is where we started our own childcare grants. We're the first organization to provide national, all discipline, all gender childcare grants, where we literally say, we will provide you money to go work, to pay for the babysitter. You can use one of those hours to shower, like whatever you need. And this came from taking my own experiences and then starting to interview people and saying like, what's keeping us from these jobs, and having to realize for myself how much work I turned down because I look at that contract payment and I'm like, I don't have the babysitting money for that. I don't have the babysitting money for that. If there was money on top of that, I could do it, but I don't have the babysitting money for that. I know people who have reached out to their theater and asked for childcare money, and the theater's like, we can't set that aside. And that person had to turn down work. I have so many of these stories that I carry around in my heart. And it was just a year ago now, what was it? 2019, I guess. So just over a year in the fall. Yeah, I won't say the dates, but it was an incredible show, an incredible contract, an incredible company, an incredible theater. And I didn't even ask for myself if I could have a childcare stipend. That's how much our mouths are shut, is that I forgot to ask for myself. Okay, so this is on me. And I talk about it for others all the time and still have that sense of fear. And I feel like they would have done something to help me out. But all of that to say, I didn't ask for additional money. So I kept my full-time job working from home going while I was doing the show, and with one of the top tier regional contracts during Tech Week, I ended up with $9 in my bank account.
Ugh.
And that fear of paying the babysitter on my dinner break and just praying that it didn't go negative until I got my check the next Friday morning was so consuming. And this is from a privileged position of getting a job and having remote employment that I could control. And this was after years of doing this work, and it just burned me inside and made me sure that, like, I would continue to remind people, like, if I had that, this is what we advise institutions, to set aside $500 per caregiver. And if you need to just do it once, do it on Tech Week. And the difference that would have made is I wouldn't have had to wonder where groceries were going to come from if my bank account went into the negative before I got my check. And that was recently. And so just like, I don't think people understand when they say it's too expensive. It's like, no, we're saying it's expensive because it continues to fall on the individual, on the most vulnerable, on the person in need. And it is not too expensive for the institution connected to a board, connected to a community who can relate to this struggle better than anything else you're asking for. I mean, and PAL has the data, PAL has the interviews. We have the connections to institutions who have done this and did it long before PAL, did it just because they knew it was right and their members were having children. And I just want to shout out the team and Elevator Repair Service, and then also Playwrights Realm, who developed the Radical Parent Inclusion Project with us. These are theaters who prioritize the people and said it's our responsibility to make sure you can enter our spaces and continue making art with us. And what they have said to an institution, and like I can continue giving numbers if you want to go down this path, but to an institution is they said, we were surprised how affordable it was. And all parents can say is we're surprised how expensive this is. So it's expensive for the person, but it's so doable for the organization. And that's why I wrote that in that piece, because it's proven and true, both. Yeah. Sorry. Or
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Can I get guide 1? So some of the things that Rachel has been talking about is the Society of the Best Practices Handbook. If we go to guide 2. Here, you can actually see we got Sarah Rule, playwright. My God, that's a writer. We have some wonderful people who have also contributed. Rachel, when it comes to this work, this undertaking of just the guide itself, what was that process like?
Enormous, but also really satisfying. So it's off the site right now. We've been using the handbook in our case studies with different theaters, and what's been so surprising is how many people were like, oh, you know who else you should talk to? And it was almost like this underground network of people who could point me to others who would support this work. And it was actually really healing, because what I realized is that solutions did exist, and we just wanted to gather them all in one place. But also the reason why it has been so difficult is because the solutions have existed in pockets. And when that happens, discrimination can flourish in the spaces in between. And so it was illuminating, it was healing, and the undertaking has just been enormous, just in the, archiving and gathering in and of itself. But it's also been really empowering, because now I have these numbers and I have these stories, so that when I am challenged, I want people to know I'm not coming to you just with a dream. I'm coming to you with a dream and evidence and an offer to help make this path, and to help make this path for everyone who intersects with this reality. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like taking it in. This is something that I find very interesting. We see you, white America. Can I get we see you 1? So there's this article. Theaters honor Dr. King's dream by acting on We See You, white American theater demands. This is the DC Metro. Can I get, there was something in it that really stood out to me. Can I get We See You 2? In their list of demands, they essentially ask for the same thing in the Black Theater Matters bill when it comes to caregiving, which in their full list of demands shows that this is a problem way beyond, we could take that down because I think you all are going to jump on this again. One of the responses we would always get was, this is a Karen problem. This is the Karens again, trying to victimize themselves and equate it. And what is your response? And this is specifically why I was like, I want three white women now. What is your response when people say, when it comes to caregiving, the three of you are the face of that problem?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in on this. I would say for the most part, they're right. And this is what I will fully acknowledge publicly in any space that I'm in, is that the majority of the essays, I mean, the New York Times is a great example. All the stories on motherhood are like how to manage your nanny's schedule and yours. And you're like, that's not really my experience. And all the essays on like the difficulty of motherhood and the conversations in the space, a lot of times are happening because we have the privilege of a platform to talk about it. And so caregiving, and that was also something that Hal tried to dismantle from the very beginning and illuminate, is that caregiving, often when a solution is provided, it's provided in the context of the privileged, by the privileged, and for the privileged. Just like any other solution, like pay equity or even like gun laws, there are racist roots to the majority of the solutions that we currently have. And so when it comes to caregiving, PAL, from its inception, has had the vertical 50-50 commitment. And that's all layers of leadership will have a minimum of 50% BIPOC representation. They will always have a Black representative. And that's because I wanted to put people above me who hold me accountable and who speak into what the conversation is, what the needs are, what the solution should be. My mom is from Brazil, and while I don't experience the same discrimination, I saw her beautifully navigate spaces where like her accent was talked about, or there was a language situation. And I knew that like gracious spaces would welcome it. But I also know that there are certain employment opportunities that are different for someone who speaks differently. And so that tiny glimpse that I grew up with of what that is also personally connects me to this conversation of saying, I know that I can get in the room differently than other people can. Mm-hmm. And so my role is to walk into the room and make PAL's number one recommendation, which is, let's remember who we're centering in the conversation of caregiving. And we always center the most vulnerable. Don't think about helping just the people in your institution. Think about how to create policy that supports the people who can't even reach your institution, who can't even be employed by you yet. Because we say, okay, who does this impact the most? Put them at the center, build the solutions from there. And then it will domino effect to support other people. But if you're like, we're going to create caregiver support for the privileged and then try to make it work for the marginalized, it's an uphill battle and it's impossible. And it's a huge reason why the majority of solutions feel so threatened or disoriented when we're like, oh, there's not enough representation. They're like, oh, no, we did it again. And I just want to say that from the beginning, this conversation has and must always be about the intersection of the reality of caregiving, that the majority of marginalized communities experience the greatest responsibility of caregiving, both of elder care and of a minor legal dependence, and receive the least support. They're also the communities, the Black community, Indigenous community, communities of color, the Latin community, are statistically the communities who show the greatest amount of improvement when solutions are implemented. So yes, while the people who are crying and whining and present and have a platform about this are a lot of white women, as long as we say like, oh, there's a call, what's beyond that call, and center what's beyond that call, then we're doing the right thing. It is so much in how we execute it and how we continue to create access and representation in the room. Right.
Jen, Leanne, when it comes to Broadway babysitters, who do you find yourself hiring the most? Whose homes do you find yourself in the most? And oh God, let me start with that, and then I'll ask the follow-up.
You know,
can take that.
Yeah, I mean, it has changed so much even in this past year, specifically because of COVID. I mean, it's been very disheartening to see that so many of our artists' families have had to leave the site because even though they still need childcare, they don't have the income right now because theater doesn't exist. But I guess if we were to talk about the before time, because that's hopefully where we're going to end up again, is that everything is even better than it was before, and more inclusive. Our families, we see a lot of everyday families coming, everyday muggle, whatever you want to call them, coming to us because they are so excited about the opportunity to not only help artists provide a source of income and like do their little part to support the community, but also because our caregivers are so playful. Our sitters, our caregivers aren't just sitting them in front of the TV and going on their phone. They are building forts, they're putting on costumes. So our families are really excited by that. But in the before time, we were also really excited through the efforts with PAL to see an increase in our artist members because we were able to support them in the efforts we were making through our discounted rates, through the audition drop-off initiatives that we're trying to continue, and the childcare matinees. And so from those, we've seen an increase as well. As far as our sitters, we have all kinds of artists from all different, all over. I mean, we understand that art, and especially during this time, is such something that is hard to even pinpoint. So that listen, we're all multi-hyphenates here. Like we all are multi-hyphenates here. So we have stage managers, we have actors, we have dancers, we have creatives, we have writers. So we bring in so many different voices and so many different communities that the parents actually get to pick, like, what kind of day do I want my child to have today? Do I want them to be dancing around? Could they be maybe doing some art? I mean, where else can you get that? It's amazing. It's really cool to see.
We don't even have to ask the second half of that question. You answered it.
Did I?
Yeah, it's funny. I can pull back, like certain interviews, you have to like build them up to get to the answer. And I'm just like, oh, this is easy. You're making this really easy for me today. Thank you.
You know what? Can I add to that real quick? We actually do. And we have people at all different points in their career as well. We have people who are Broadway veterans sitting, still babysitting. And then we have people who, are non-equity trying to get in to the Broadway world, so we've run the gamut. And we get so much from it as well. So
one of the best moments is when we get an email from a sitter that says, because of this, I've been able to pay my bills. And also, guess what? I just booked Broadway. So I can't sit for the next year because I have a contract. And I'm like,
we've had like at least 8 people do that and get their Broadway shows. And they're like, bye. And we're like,
didn't you call it a good luck day job?
Every time we hire someone, they book Broadway.
We do, but we're the company who also welcomes them back when they are without a show, when the show closes, and that we don't hold it against them. Like other industries do. We're like, yes, go do your gig, and then you come back when you're done. Or don't go. Or don't
talk about the spaces in between.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, surprise, we broke news. So there's 3 things here: Broadway babysitters. Everyone's not from Broadway. Number 2, if you want to book Broadway, go to Broadway babysitters. Fact, 100%.
We're waiting for that for us too. I mean, I'm available. You want me to give you some 16 bars?
16 bars, FBI clearance, child abuse clearance. You're good. You're set for Broadway. That's the scene.
You're hired
again.
All right. I am happy with the direction that the Black Theater Matters bill is going in, but for myself, I don't think it's radical enough. So instead of thinking about just the convention, let's talk about the future in a segment I like to call the Babysitters Club Brainstorms. So this is the first one. Can I get number 1? Dedicated funds for leave policies and childcare /elder care. Is this radical or not?
No, it should be expected. That's not radical. I think we should go ahead, Rachel.
No, keep going, Jen. Keep going.
No. You say it better than I can, so you go.
No, you said it beautifully. Because I'll ditto that. It should be expected, and the word we use is it should be standard.
Yes,
it should be standard.
That is standard for other industries.
There are certain points in history where things that we accept as standard now were radical, like making child labor illegal or allowing poor people to enter the front cars of trains. I mean, they're still first class, and that's an issue, right? But It's only radical. It's like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Radical is in the eye of the system holder. It's only radical
Oh.
to people whose comfort it disrupts.
I want a T-shirt that says that. Can I get a T-shirt? I need that.
T-shirt, so
I like that.
That's a solid hip hop bar.
Yeah.
Can I get no, we're gonna go for 1B. Can I get 1B? Are cat carriers effective childcare solutions? Is this radical or not?
Cat
I'm
carrier.
not sure what that means.
like putting a child in a cat carrier? Is that
Are
what this
cat
is?
carriers effective?
No. Oh my gosh. I mean, no.
Yeah,
I'm still confused.
Okay.
So, like,
take
you have
them
to
to
also
the vet?
think about
What are we doing?
safety and yeah.
So that's a radical idea, right? That's radical. Okay, great.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That's
Okay.
radical. The other
Oh,
way.
that's radical. Yes,
I
yes.
get it. Okay.
And you know what's great about that is because there are people who provide nonsense like, well, if we have to, pay for people to take care of the kids, you have to pay for them to take care of their dogs. And there's like a very clear legal line that says like major legal dependence requires it to be of the same species. Like there are already words that help us define that. And also if someone's dog is sick, like why are you mad that you have to help people? I just don't get it. Also,
Can I get number 2?
Yeah.
Shape the space for needs over convention. Is that radical?
No. That's standard and should be expected.
I would also add it's the only way to do it that's effective and sustainable because convention is instantly dated the moment you put it into place, but needs will always be evolving. And so your policies will too.
What does that space look like when it's shaped?
It prioritizes the conversation of the people with the least access to it. It engages with them personally. It gives them agency, and it allows them to define what access means and not the people who are already in the room.
All right. Can I get 2B? Beers for tears, using alcohol to stop the crying. Is this radical?
One, honestly.
I mean, slipping a little whiskey in their bottle? I don't think I can condone that.
Special occasions only. No. No, I mean, I think we all know the answer to that, but yes.
That would be radical. It's radical.
It is radical to as a Broadway baby service representative, I do not recommend.
I do not condone that.
I do not condone, and I would not.
Yikes.
But there's so many babies in the past and who are adults now who had teething issues, and just that little swivel of whiskey solved so many issues.
I mean, that's a little bit.
Does that for all of us, though, doesn't it?
Giving them a full beer. Here you go.
I'm allowed to give myself a little swivel of red wine when I am tired.
Yeah, maybe the other person, maybe the caregiver. I don't know about that.
When they're done off the job and home.
Yeah. Right. There you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Can I get 3? Supportive scheduling to reduce burnout and financial burdens. Radical?
We know the answer. It is not.
I'm just setting you up for that 10 out of 12.
I mean, my question is like, why would this be radical for anybody?
Right.
I mean, forget about caregiving.
Yes.
So burnout is something we all experience. So this is not something that should be radical for anybody. But when you put it in the caregiving space, it is vital to the survival of the people that you're supporting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And don't we want the best product? Don't producers, don't directors, don't, networks want the best product? Don't we want that to be less time in the rehearsal room? Don't we want that to be better used time? We want it to be happier people. We want rested people. So give them the time to recover and rest, especially a mom who has to get up for a 3:00 a.m. feeding, So yes, it's not radical and it should be implemented.
Let's get this next one. May I have the next one, please? I've lost count. Work from home policies for every organization. Policies? Policies. Home policies.
Policiers. That's how it's pronounced.
Is it It's Policiers.
It's Italian.
Radical or no?
It's radical before COVID in that it was.
Yeah.
But there's no way we can be productive if that person works from home. And a big obstacle we heard over and over was, well, we just don't have a precedent. We don't have a precedent for that. So we can't give it to you. And I'm like, guess what? Everyone has a precedent. Congratulations.
But isn't that what change is? Is doing things without a precedent? If there was a precedent, how would we make any changes if it has already been done? It just is silly to say that. Well, we don't have a precedent. Well, what? We're trying to make change.
This is how precedents are made, right?
Exactly.
Is the need, and you're like, we don't have a precedent. That doesn't mean we can't do it. That means we should consider why we don't have a precedent.
Exactly.
This is
100%.
This is why I was very drawn to number 4, the one that we're talking about right now. It seems to be the pattern. Like it almost seems to be almost ingrained in us to deal after the line. So it took COVID for us to be like, oh my God, Zoom is an option. Like and this is what I think about with this 4th one is the idea of like, it took COVID for us to go, oh wait, this isn't radical at all.
And
it's perspective.
And do you know why? And do you know why? Because there is no such thing as being exempt or privileged from a global pandemic unless you refuse it. So all of a sudden, no matter how much power you have, you could still get sick. And so everyone's like, oh, we're all tethered to our spaces.
Yep.
Like people who cannot leave their homes, like people who do not have a babysitter, like people who, et cetera, et cetera. And now that's everyone. Everyone's like, oh, it's so hard when you are vulnerable outside. We should work from home. And we're like, that's what we've been asking for a long time. And if I can just give a shout out where, Davon, you're getting a lot of these points. If we can we share?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. So these are points from an article that I wrote for American Theater magazine called Work-Life Balance is Imperative for Everyone.
Can I get work-life, please?
Oh my gosh. Did I jump into your numbered situations though?
No,
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to say it.
Yes, work-life balance is everyone's urgent business now. As we face the COVID crisis, our field has a chance to restructure itself around human needs. Caregivers can lead the way. And my point was that caregivers can lead the way because we have had this experience of isolation. We have had this experience of financial fear, this experience of being tethered to our spaces, this experience of getting sick and you can't leave the house with a newborn or they could get sick. Not to mention the fact that some parents already are immunocompromised and then to have children on top of that and then to go to work. And so to say like, oh, hi, we've been doing this for a while. Let's have this conversation for real now that we're all in the same, some parts of the same boat.
I mean, isn't it funny though, when things affect you, when things they come into your sphere and your stratosphere, whatever, like then people pay attention and say, oh, we've got to change this because that happened to me. Instead of listening to other people say this, it needs to be changed. But you don't have kids. So you're like, no, it doesn't affect me. But when everybody is susceptible to COVID, they are sure going to change some stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It really teaches us that we need to hear. Go ahead, Leanne.
No, I did not mean to interrupt you, Jen. You were on a roll. I'm sorry.
Right.
I just you're just inspiring me because I mean, it really begs the question, like that was happening before. Those people, that not everyone can stay silent about what they're going through. So it begs the question moving forward, because ideally we're not going to go through another pandemic. That would be the ideal situation that we don't need to learn again. So how can we learn these lessons of inclusivity and honoring what people are going through without having to go through a crisis, and listening to them and creating spaces to allow them to speak? And I know that that's something that we're all trying to figure out, but it's certainly something that is overdue.
Yeah. We're doing it right now, though. This is what Davon has created.
Yeah,
a platform for change. It took a real, I'm not saying that I'm happy any of these things happened. No, not at all. But man, it has been a wake-up call for so many people in so many walks of life and so many places and so many, this is a time for us to reflect and reset,
Well,
Yeah, and I also say that what else it did is it brought people into our homes. And so, Davon, we started off the conversation with the invisible caregiving reality. There are days now where it can't help but be visible because you're in my house. So you have a problem with it, log off. This is like you're in my living room and it's going to be visible. And so people are suddenly like, oh, there's a lot of energy when other smaller or people who are minors are in your space and they're occupying your time and attention. And it would take very little for me to help you carry that. It has been illuminating for some people that way. I also want to honor one of the comments on Facebook Live that Tamanya brings up, who is a dear friend and leader, truly insightful. Please get to know Tamanya Garza's work. But she shares a real reality, which is the intersection of gender, where yes, if I could read it, you talk about how caregiving is overwhelmingly work that people who are not men are tasked with. It powerfully impacts who is in the room, who makes decisions, and who has the ability to take theater jobs. It is part of how patriarchy is able to flourish. And that's the real deal right there. And when we're talking about representation, we're also talking about how the workday itself is structured for white cis men who have free caregiving at home, whatever form it takes. And so when we're talking about not just gender parity, gender inclusion, this idea that we're not on the binary either, that there are individuals who are impacted socially, financially, economically, and employment because of their gender. It also impacts caregiving. We talk to designers the majority of the time, those who identify as women or who are part of a gender that is not well represented in their discipline. They have to give up work to participate in caregiving. And most of the times because they're paid less. And so it's this incredible cycle where we lose people. And you want to talk about the leaks in the gender pipeline, here's a big gaping hole. And it's called caregiving. And it's going to fall on people who are not men the majority of the time. And we have to deal with that. Who do we want in the room? What efforts are we putting into bringing those people into the room? It has to include this.
I want to ask one final question before I give you the big thank you. And here it is. Jen, you said a little bit earlier, a lot of changes coming from this show and the stuff we're doing over here. A lot of changes coming from PAL, Broadway Babysitters, and everyone who's standing up and advocating. But I want to put a little perspective into that. 2 years ago, I am hit by a Mack truck. It stops me and forces me to get serious. I am on a bicycle. I go. From there, I have encounters where I'm in final callbacks for Broadway, but because of my injury, I'm seen as a liability, so they keep me away. From there, we have this whole race issue that breaks out from our elections. And from there, I go, I want to do the receipts. From there, COVID takes place. And then people are including Zoom and all these other fun things. And now all of a sudden, everyone is starting to see the light. Here's my issue. It seems like the only effective part of that story is that everyone had to deal with being stuck in the house. And I question if that's empathy to even begin with. So my question is, getting people to understand and doing the heavy lifting, it's clear that COVID has helped us in this fight. But when COVID is gone, how do we get people to straight up give a damn?
That's a tough one. You know what? That is tough. What we make it into policy is what we do. Exactly what you're doing. That's we put it into policy now, and then it can't be questioned when it's in policy. It's there. It is provided for, equities members. That is a very tough question. It's kind of the same thing that happened with 9/11. We all came together as a country, as a people, and we cared about each other, and we fought for each other, and then it kind of just fell apart again. So I don't know the answer to that. I really don't, because we keep having conversations like this, absolutely. But how do we keep people from falling off? People are very involved right now, but then they're going to be self-involved again later. That's hard.
I think we all have a common language now of understanding the struggle, a common language to a certain extent. There is still a certain amount of privilege in everything we do. Access to internet service for one thing, and access to a computer. Like even that is providing yet another form of disparity. But
Yeah.
I think that using the common language that we have now developed and sharing this, people respond to stories. We're in a business of story making, and making sure that those stories have a place to be heard, and making sure that speaking with that common understanding and language of what we've gone through will help people continue past this and say, oh, I do remember when I was at home and my child was crawling all over me, and I love my child, but that is really rough, and I didn't have the like space to be able to express that in the platform I had. And then also looking at, you know, that we're all stuck inside, and there are people that are stuck inside after this. That will not go away. Do you remember that feeling when you were stuck inside? Someone else goes through that every single day. And being able to reference that and say, the feeling you had does not stop just because you stopped feeling it, is how we can continue to appeal to people and say, let's not have this just disappear. Let's make something happen.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's another t-shirt. Can you write that down, Rachel? That's another t-shirt.
Yes, I'm going to go back.
Things don't stop.
Receipts. Yeah, it's huge, because what we're talking about is inviting people to the conversation. But I'm also going to pair that with, don't be fine too fast. And that's a phrase that I use when, you know, like especially when you like provide solutions for the pros, are like, oh, thanks, that's good now. But then it doesn't ripple to the people in need. It doesn't ripple to the marginalized communities. And that's fine too fast, where we're like, oh, okay, thanks so much. You provided me with the childcare finances. We're good. And we're not taking care of auditions. We're not taking care of maternity leave. We're not taking care of family leave. But the inviting to the conversation is important, just like Leanne said, because, you know, we do believe that everyone is a caregiver at some point, even if that includes yourself. And so by saying, I'm not saying this to get something that you won't get. I'm saying this because if you ever need it, I am going to be your number one warrior in making sure that you have the help you need. So by helping me out in this way, you're surrounding yourself with a community that's going to see you and won't let you become invisible and won't let you fall off if you get sick, or if your sister gets sick, or if your parent gets sick. You're going to know that I care right away, even if I don't know them. And if I can promise someone that, then suddenly when their defensive walls fall, when their fear falls, they're able to reasonably realize, you're right, this involves all of us. And then like, let that discomfort live. Don't get fined too fast, but let that discomfort live until we find solutions that reach everybody.
All right, so I'm going to bring this Babysitters Club meeting to an end. I want to thank you all for being here. This has been, again, I'm happy for every single episode. This was one of the ones. I was like, it's time. Let's do this. Now I can just throw this video at people and be like, hey, have you watched this? Have you watched it? Before we had this discussion, have you watched?
I love that. You're like, I love all things. This was one of those things.
You know, you always got to try and be fair.
Yeah, it's being diplomatic, but we know.
So the next time the four of us will meet is to talk about our merch options. I think we've created some great sayings today.
There's some good things. Yep.
Yeah.
Deal. So I'm going to address the audience really quick. But before I do that, sometimes you got to ask for help. And thankfully, there was a delegate that came through. Maria Cristina Posada Sly is here with another Sly comment.
I said what I said.
Hi friends, Maria Cristina here, and today we're going to talk about how bystanders can become allies. Now, a bystander is someone who witnesses sexual harassment, and an ally is a person who believes sexual harassment is wrong, supports victims of sexual harassment, and takes actions to stop the sexual harassment. I know what you're thinking. I want to be an ally. I just don't know how. Well, that's where I come in. So, here are some options for a bystander to become an ally. You can confront the harasser, you can document the behavior, and that might look like recording audio or video on your phone of the behavior. However, do check which state you're in, because in some states it's actually illegal to record conversations without consent. However, that is an option in some states. You can take photos on your phone. You can write a note or an email on your phone describing what happened, which is also important because then you have documentation of the exact date and time that it happened. then you can give the documentation to the victim so they can decide what to do with it. Other ways to help: the bystander can interrupt the behavior in a way that stops the harassment. Perhaps find a way to separate the harasser from the victim in a distraction. It's important to definitely follow up with the victim, check in with them after the situation's passed, offer help and support, and share resources. It's also important to know that witnesses can report without involving the recipient of the harassment. I would say just use your best judgment. Well, there you have it, your bystander toolkit.
I said what I said.
Thank you, Maria Cristina Posada Sly. Usually I like to do this by myself, but I was like, no, keep them on. I would have kept you on from the beginning too, because I wanted to promote what you all are doing. So we have PAALtheater.com. That's Ari for anyone just listening. So that's PAALtheatre.com. And then we have BroadwayBabysitters.com, not to be confused with Off-Broadway. No, I'm sorry. So
We include them too. And regional.
Regional stories.com.
And non-equity.
open doors, open equity. No, so for anyone watching, I know there was a bit of a conflict. I know that the Actors Equity Association, EEOC, had their event. I believe it's Meet the Producers. There were 7 producers. 3 hours has gone by. I'm here to let you know, just in case you chose us, they finally got into their 3rd of 7th producers. I'm being petty. There's this joke of like, there's the time in which we live in, like, move around, and then there's the speed of equity, which was incredibly slow. So I'm just making
I got
fun
it.
of that.
I thought it was super funny. I've been in those meetings. Good.
Wait, do you not age in those? Like, the time goes slower, so you don't age? Can I get in there?
No, you age faster because of the industry.
Oh.
Women stop working at 25. Sorry.
Then never mind.
Different conversation.
I'm going to take the last little bit of time to share a story, and then we're going to call it in. So why was caregiving so important? It seems kind of out of the way, even though I think if you haven't been listening to the last like hour, 26 minutes, you must be deaf. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but I think it's pretty clear even after that. But here's a story, and I got permission just not to use the name. I had the joy of working overseas, working in LA, working on both coasts, working in the middle sometimes, a lot of times actually. But every chance I get, I like to interact with the people I'm acting with, the actresses, the actors, and just get to know a little bit, because I find that, yes, school was great. These master classes and all these self-development things are great, but there's something to learning about people's specific stories. Sometimes I think you could take a lot away. So I'm in the dressing room with this woman, and we're talking, and I'm like, can I ask you like some tough questions? Like, I've always been that one to be like, I'm going to ask this question. I don't know how it's going to land on you, but I'm just going to ask it. So my thing was like, and she was pretty well off. She is pretty well off. She's pretty well known. And I go, so what's the cost? What's the cost? Like, what did it cost you? So she's saying all these stories, and she's going through, the costumer leaves, and it's just the two of us. She's still going, and she stops. She stops, and I'm sitting on the couch. She's like in the mirror, and she's like looking my way. And she's like, do you want to have kids? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, huh. So you asked me what it cost. And I go, yeah. And she was like, so there was a moment where I was with someone that I really liked. I was really in love. Everything was going great. I found out that I had gotten pregnant. I had gotten pregnant at an important time in my career. I sit there, a month goes by, I'm deciding how to break the news, if I should break the news, how long I could go before I have to say something. The second month comes, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm going to the doctor, making sure everything's okay. Still haven't told the person that got her pregnant that she's pregnant. She gets to the 3rd month, and she interacts on a job with someone who was also pregnant. When she's around this person, it's great. They're talking. And when that person goes away, because again, they didn't know she was pregnant as well, she hears the real thoughts of how irresponsible that is, or how this is going to affect her job, or how she used to be hot, or how that body is gone now. All of it. So she goes home on the 3rd month, and she goes, I can't possibly have a career. I cannot possibly have a career with this child. I have to start thinking elsewhere. She goes to sleep. She wakes up the next day. She goes, I don't know what other skill sets I have. I genuinely don't know what other skill sets I have. Later that week, she goes and she aborts that baby. $500, which Rachel said earlier, does not seem a lot to companies. They cannot believe how manageable it is. But to us, it is literally life and death sometimes. So I would like to thank you all for coming, and I would like for every delegate and every counselor to seriously look at this part of the bill and ask, is it really that radical? Let's get this done at the convention. Thank you all again, and have a good one. Take care.
Thank you all so
Thank you,
much.
Davon.